let me introduce you to John Verdon. He's a speaker, a presenter, a researcher with a rich and broad background in theoretical and applied social science research. And his expertise is in foresight research. And that's kind of gets really cool there. Social media, related tech, digital environments, social science, complexity, complex sciences, knowledge management, cooperative and collaborative communities, strategic human resource analysis, and just keeps going from there. Emerging cognitive, biological, and nanotechnologies and their potential impact on human and social performance. Probably a great guy to have a beer and a chat about robots and upcoming. Current interests focus on the future of identity and the enablement of flourishing world and ecology. And John, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. I have to say that I resonate with Denny. I'm going to be talking about accounting, but I'd rather read Hegel than do books. So I guess I'll share my screen. Oh, there it is. Okay, so understanding currency. So I'm going to try to give you a short history of currency as a system of accounting. The role of accounting is fundamental to living in social systems. I want to be able to make the case that economic paradigms are not scientific paradigms, they're moral frameworks, because it's how we value our values. And that sovereign currency is public money of and for and by the people, and that we can never run out of it. The key themes in sort of my work, and this is a work in progress, right? This is part of my work in the future of identity. The job is dead, long live work. We have to create to enable relevant working conditions, a relevant work. The truth is dead, long live honesty. We have to enable honest accounts. If I give you an honest account, then I'm open to your honest account, and we're not struggling to know which is true, as long as we're good faith actors. Education is dead, long live learning. We have to enable, as Marshall McLuhan said, we're now living in an age of learning a living. You know, it's a beta world. You can't use a piece of software without it changing in the next month or 6 months. And that credit and debt is social fabric. No credit and debt, no social fabric. So we have to enable valuing our values and finding values worth valuing. That's sort of the theme. So I was hired in 1998 by National Defense to be a strategic HR analyst, essentially a futurist. And I quickly realized that, you can't predict. As it says here, technologies are already past before they have a future. So what foresight is about is understanding the current evolving situations so that we can imagine what these conditions can enable. I really like this word, enable, right? A lot of us think about causality, like dominoes hitting each other, right? But enablement is a non-causal cause. So what does that mean, right? I don't know if you're familiar with the term affordance. There's a number of words that are sort of fancier than this. Adjacent possibles, Darwinian pre-adaptations. So here you see a rock, and the mouse uses the rock as a place to hide, right? The rock doesn't cause the place to be a place to hide. It enables the mouse to hide. The person looks at the rock and says, oh, I could throw it. I can use it as a tool. Oh, I could stub my toe on it, right? Living systems are less like dominoes falling down, and they're purpose driven. And in living systems, they can sort of say, oh, I can use this for that. So how many uses can you make of a screwdriver, right? Around here, you can use it as a nice pick. You can use it to, hang up something. You can turn it around, use it as a hammer. How many uses can you make of a screwdriver in space? Well, not much, because there's nothing else around it. Can we predict the third novel use of a screwdriver? No, we can't. We can't even enumerate all possible uses. So that's one sort of reason why the future is impossible to predict. Now, one of the things that is sort of core is another way that things change. I call it a change in conditions of change. And we're all used to what's called extensive properties, right? I measure a desk, its length, its width, its, and I cut the desk and I have two half desks. But there's realities made up of these other stuff that are called intensive. And these are properties of populations. So things like density, connectedness, temperature. You can't measure the temperature of one molecule. You can only measure the temperature of a big body of molecules. Pressure, flow, conductivity. And the interesting thing about these dimensions is that they're subject to a certain type of change. It's called a phase transition. So, I'm measuring the temperature of water, a pool of water. It's 99 degrees, and I measure it, 9 increments lower, 90 degrees, another 10 increments, 80, all the way down to sort of 99 increments, and water's the same, right? And I think, I got a long line of data here. I know where water's going. This is the way it is. But from 0 degrees to -1 degree, water fundamentally changes. You can't swim in it anymore. You can walk on it, right? The conditions of change have changed. And so this is really, and you can see here, this little square where you have these thresholds, from vapor to water to ice, that sort of stuff. Now, well, how is this related to currency, to people? Population size, population density isn't just adding one more. At a certain threshold, you have a different society. And this is sort of the core of sort of a quick history of both currency and society. So I've got like 3 major phase transitions. This is sort of a cartoon. It's really simplified. And so, you'll have to sort of suspend disbelief. So when we're hunter and gatherers, we live in small groups, right? Now, we're the only species with a blushing reflex, because in a small group, and we create conditions for being in the group through a sort of a shame or praise, right? And we didn't need writing, because it's sort of like, and we all do this moral accounting. You can have, 3 jelly beans each to 2 kids, but if one is a little bit bigger, that kid is going to say, hey, that's not fair, right? In relationships, we'll go, I think I'm loving you more than you love me because I've done this, 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 this. We can't not do this sort of moral accounting. That's what keeps us as a group. Now, this accounting of the group, we remember, 3 years ago, I did this for you, right? This sort of conversation, this sort of accounting is consciousness of a small group. Now, for 30,000 years, we knew we were proto-farmers. We knew how to grow things, but we couldn't scale up, right? Because once you start scaling up agriculture, you get surplus, right? You have bigger groups. So it wasn't knowledge of growing things that allowed us to move from hunting and gathering to agriculture. That became possible when we had to invent writing. And the beginnings of writing, the origins of writing are in accounting. So, the group is getting bigger, and I really can't count to 10, but I could make a little round ball for this sheep, a round ball for that sheep, a round ball for the next sheep, until I had enough round balls for all the sheep I had. Those little round balls were put in a sort of a clay pouch, and those were kept in a central repository so that my sheep could join the big flock of other sheep, right? And then at the end of the season, the little pouch is broken, and you see how many sheep I should get back. Pretty soon they realized, oh, I don't have to put them in a little pouch. I can make impressions on the outside of the pouch. And then pretty soon, oh, I don't need to make a clay pouch. It's just a clay slab, and I can make little, so a triangle for a bushel, a circle for a sheep, on and on and on. And there's a wonderful woman, I always forget her name, Deborah Barat. She wrote this great book. She's an archaeologist and found all these things and finally made the case that writing has its roots in accounting. And once we could do accounting, we could all of a sudden scale up, right? From a small group, because now when we have 1,000, that we can't hold that in memory. When we're a small group, consciousness is that little conversation we have with everybody in our head. And we all, when you're thinking, it's really sort of, you're talking to somebody, right? So 1,000, when hunting gathering groups generally didn't get bigger than about 50 to 100, 200. Once you scale up to 1,000 and 5,000, you just can't do that anymore. So accounting allowed us to scale up into agriculture. And agriculture isn't just hunting and gathering that grows things. It's all of a sudden you have new occupations. You've got a miller. You've got a weaver. You have a lot more occupations. And so all of a sudden your economy becomes more complex, so you can't hold it in flesh memory. So the beginning of writing is really in accounting. And it's only through accounting that we could scale up into larger groups, right? So now we're in an agricultural society, and it's not a hunting gathering society that grows food because it's got way more occupations. It's got new institutions, right? But still, you sort of live in small groups. Now, in order to scale up to the industrial type of age, you need science and technology, but you also needed new institutions, banks, ways of capturing money, accounting. You needed to account for many more things. So, went from close ties where you knew everybody to loose ties in agriculture. And so in the industrial age, we did double entry bookkeeping, banks, a whole host of new institutions. And that allowed us to exchange without having to know, without close ties, without having to actually know your neighbors. Now, if you would have asked a feudal society, oh, here's this new invention. It's the internet. It allows you to communicate over greater distances, right? The feudal, the serf would think, oh, okay, now the lord of the manor will know, exactly how to tax me. I'll know what he needs. But we wouldn't have imagined these new institutions of banking, of, I can't read. I'm sorry, I'm fading that sort of. All right. Now, as we move from agriculture to industry, we move in agriculture, you pretty much know your neighbors. Most people never lived, never went more than 100 miles from their neighbors. And again, sort of moral accounting, we keep each other in check. Coastal cities were a little bit different because they could trade over longer distances, but I'm not going to get too complex. But when we got to the industrial society, that meant again a greater explosion, another phase transition to greater size, greater complexity. And we needed new institutions. We needed schools. We needed occupations. We needed way more occupations. Now, as we move into the industrial age, we can't move into the industrial age with a feudal society where everybody knows everybody. So we had to be dragging and screaming to accept anonymity. And in the early days, as we started moving into the cities, which were death traps then, right? It was only after 1850 that cities actually started becoming a place that weren't death traps, that had a population surplus as opposed to where you go to die. That required a shift to anonymity, right? And to have anonymity, we needed new institutions. We needed ways of knowing who we were, driver's licenses, birth certificates, all that sort of stuff. Way more complicated society. And now we've moved into the digital and everyone has audience, right? We not only are anonymous, but we also have audience, which in this sort of way drags us back down to hunting and gathering. Okay, right. So like each of these shifts are like a phase transition. An agriculture society is not a hunting gathering society. An industrial society is not an agricultural society, and the digital society is not an industrial society. So through all of this, we had to develop currency, right? So always, when we were hunters and gatherers, we had memory. We could remember what our friends did. All right. The story in economics is that there was always barter, right? I've got a pot, you've got a hammer, and we'll trade. But barter really, if you read David Graeber's The First Debt, the First 5,000 Years, barter only existed rarely when two groups came together and they weren't going to be together very long. And so then you have this equivalent exchange. Always and everywhere, you have this sort of accounting, right? And so, so money equals information and accounting equals social viability. And so I want to talk about modern monetary theory, right? Because this is the sort of the next phase of our economic paradigm that I think is necessary. So, you know, we've gone from shells to cows. And again, like if I'm living in an agricultural society and I need a pot and I've got a cow, I'm not going to trade you the cow for the pot. What I'll do is I'll say, look, that pot is worth the cow's leg, but I'm not going to kill the cow now. So I'm going to give you an IOU for the cow's leg. And when I get rid of the cow, you'll get the leg, but I want the pot now, right? So what money is the circulating IOU, right? What we did when we invented modern money, right, the dollar, is we allowed for anonymous exchange. Oh, geez, I'm sort of getting a little lost here. So here we go. So distributed social currency. The next, sorry, I'm drawing a blank here. So we went from, so we've had this fiat currency for, you know, maybe 200 years. And the latest currency now is we're talking Bitcoin. The latest innovation, 2008, produced this paper. And the thing is Bitcoin is not the thing. The thing that allows Bitcoin is the what's called the blockchain. What the blockchain is a distributed ledger, right? So to sort of the Bitcoin was the reward that's given out to maintain the ledger, right? And when you have a public ledger, and in a sense, this harkens back to when we lived in small groups. Only it was flesh memory that was the ledger. You know, you did me a favor, right? So it's like you need a cup of sugar and you're going to go to your neighbor. And you say, look, I need a cup of sugar. Do you have some sugar I can borrow? And you have this conversation. Oh, I really like this neighbor. It gives you a cup of sugar, you use it, and then when you go to give it back, you either give a little more or a little less because you want to keep the relationship open. But if you don't like your neighbor, you're going to make sure you give exactly what you got back, right? We do this all the time, this sort of moral accounting, right? It's this accounting system. When we learned writing as an accounting system, that extended flesh memory. When we invented currency, that was also a way of accounting, right? That extended our memory because we couldn't, you know, you can't remember over 2,000, 10,000, a million people. So the blockchain, right, as this accounting system is to me the next stage of complexity for our society. You know, China plans to launch a social credit system sometime soon. So, what's it? Oh, right. Oh yeah, here's the ledger of all transactions distributed. So the ledger has this transactional history, right? We can't forget. And in nature, okay, so it's not the coin that's the thing. It's the remembering of our exchanges that's the thing. So, you know, there's a lot of places in the third world where, you know, proving you own a piece of property can be hard. You know, the centralized repository for deeds burns up. And some rich person comes along and says, no, I own your place. And that rich person's got, you know, weapons and clout. And so how do you prove your case? The ability to remember that you own something, right? That's accounting. Writing has its roots in accounting. So what the blockchain gives us is this an amazing innovation in accounting, where you can see the history of transactions. So now think of it, we have now copyright and patents, and that really actually impedes innovation. The reason copyright and patents were invented was actually to enrich, to make innovation happen faster. So imagine I'm a musician, right? And I write a song and I put it out on the blockchain. Now, everybody who wants to listen to my song accesses the blockchain, which leaves a record of, oh, you've listened to it, right? Now I can leave that open for anyone to listen to it, because now there's an accounting for who's listened to it, and I get some sort of credit. Okay, so somebody else is a movie maker and takes my song, right? And it's open, and the fact that it takes my song leaves a record, right? So I don't have to put a fence around it. And now they put their song, I put their song in my movie, and I release the movie on the blockchain. So anybody now who sees the movie, well, I get a credit for seeing the movie, but so does the person who wrote the song get a credit for that, right? So the blockchain as an accounting mechanism allows for a more rapid dispersal of innovation without having to sort of put a barrier around it. Now, there's all sorts of things that we can account for, right? So this, to me, is the blockchain. This, and going back to the example of the property. This distributed ledger is unfudgeable. Once once enough people have a copy of the ledger, and no one has 50%, that becomes a sort of immutable record of use. And so therefore, you don't need those sort of institutions that enable monopolies to sort of control a new invention. It goes back to the original meaning of patents, which is allowing people to use it, but to get credit for it. So the core, I think, of the next economic paradigm for the 21st century is modern monetary theory. The easy book to read, there's a number of them, but The Deficit Myth by Stephanie Kelton. She was the chief economist on Barack Obama's, economic panel. She was Bernie Sanders' chief economist. And basically, the modern monetary theory is about the policy that can develop from the fact that a nation with its sovereign currency, right, that's not pegged to another currency, that's not based on a scarce good, fiat currency, can never run out of money. The question is never, how are we going to pay for it? The question is, what are the resources I have? Do I have the materials? Do I have the people? Do I have the knowledge? Those are the scarce things, not money. So the role of a sovereign state is not to balance a budget. Rather, it's to budget to create a flourishing economy, right? You can't, it's like a scorekeeper. Can they run out of points? Oh, stop the game, I'm going to run out of points. No, right? A sovereign nation with its own currency can never run out of money. Now, where did we get this idea of running out of money? Right? In 1980, Reagan started with the metaphor, right, to get over the Keynesian sort of thing. Oh, you know, the state is like a family. The 9 most dangerous words in the English language, he said. Hi, I'm from the government. I'm here to help. Margaret Thatcher, at the same time, right? There is no such thing as society. There are only individuals, right? Now, this myth, this sort of understanding of being a family. Yeah, if I'm a family and I spend more than I make, right? Because I'm a currency user, I'm going to be in trouble if I spend more than I make. And the myth that there is no society, there's only individuals, that government is bad, makes us blind to the fact that a sovereign currency is actually of and for and by. It's public money, it's our money. And that we can never run out of it. It's what we use, the nation can use to do whatever it needs to do to help society. So this idea of austerity, this idea of balancing the budget, right, has used the myth of the state being like a family. And we all understand that story, except the state is not a currency user, it's a currency issuer. And what is currency? It's an accounting system, right? Just because the dollar is anonymous, it's really, you know, you look at the dollar bill, you know, legal tender for currencies, public and private. And how do we create currency? There, you know, one of the perfect examples is in Asia somewhere, I forget the exact country, but Britain was trying to get people to work. And, you know, the classic colonial complaint is that local people were lazy. But the thing is, it didn't need to work. I grow my stuff, I have my stuff, I don't need that. So what Britain did is they imposed a hut tax. Anybody who had a hut had to pay a tax, but they couldn't pay it in chickens and corn. No, they had to pay it in the British pound. And the moment they imposed the hut tax that can only be paid in the British pound, that created unemployment. So now everybody had to get a job in order to pay their tax, right? Governments do not fund their expenditures through tax dollars. What comes first, right? Taxes? Do I need to tax you before I have pounds? Well, who creates pounds? Who's got the monopoly in creating pounds or dollars, right? So what does deficit mean? The state will issue $100 and then say, oh, okay, I have to de-issue these dollars. I'm going to tax $60 back. Oh my goodness, I have a deficit of $60. But in double entry bookkeeping, that means the economy has a surplus of $40. If the government took back the $100 it issued, there would be no money in their currency, right? And when you have an economy whose population size is growing, whose complexity is growing, deficits become a regular thing just so that people have money to buy what people are making, right? So now the key reason taxes that come in is so that people will use the currency. It's like Milton Friedman says, anybody can create currency. The trick is getting people to use the currency. So when you can pay taxes only in the currency of the country, you've got to find a way to earn that currency, right? Now, taxes are also used for other things, creating a level playing field. Even Adam Smith, who wasn't a capitalist, he was a market, you know, like I read Adam Smith, he believed in markets, but for a market to work, you have to have a level playing field. Monopolies actually destroy markets, destroy market economies. So you need to create a level playing field. So sometimes you need to take currency back. You need to make sure that the difference between the poorest and the richest is sort of feasible, right? You also can use taxes to nudge behaviors. We tax alcohol and smoking and all that sort of stuff. But the government does not use taxes to fund its expenditures. It's like using, what happens when you get an IOU? Do you keep it and spend it? No, you burn it up. And in fact, there was a huge fire in Britain because for the, I think up until almost 1900s, they were using tally sticks as a record. And the tally sticks burnt up and I think the mint burnt down. I don't have quite the details, but that's it enough. So currency is a way of accounting, right? The government can never run out of money. And so, and to me, this is the next economic paradigm, right? The question is how to utilize, allocate, and renew our values differently. How do we value our values? So now I want to sort of just shift gears a little bit, right? Modern monetary theory, we all have to sort of bone up on and realize nations can never run out of money. Okay, now I'm going to introduce these terms: homeostasis, allostasis, and accounting. These to me are in some ways synonymous. Homeostasis is a biological term for how a living being maintains its viability. Now, in a living being, in my body, there are innumerable values, innumerable variables that have to be kept viable. The only time a living system is in equilibrium pretty much is when it's dead, right? Or for a brief moment as it's doing something. Even if a living system is staying there, it's using energy. So homeostasis is the mechanism, it's the accounting system of a living system that determines its state of being, right? So every cell of our body has a nerve cell that comes up to the back of our brain, and there's a map of our brain that allows, oh, this cell needs some potassium, there needs to be more sugar, I've got too much of this. All of these variables have to stay not balanced, but in viable thresholds, right? So if you got too much, too low, not enough, you can die. If you got too much, it becomes toxic. So homeostasis is self-regulating process for biological system. Now, I just recently learned a new word, allostasis. So that's homeostasis that anticipates the future. Now, none of us, our brain has to anticipate the future. You can't catch a ball by knowing where the ball is. You have to be able to see trajectory and put, like Wayne Gretzky, you got to go where the puck's going to be, right? And so in keeping ourselves viable, there has to be sort of at least a minimal foresight capability to sort of get supplies there in time. This is accounting. This is what accounting does for any system. Social system, for the government. Now, the other thing in the neoliberal economic thing is what Margaret Thatcher said, there is no society, there are only individuals. We can't live by ourselves. We live in rich ecologies. All of us, every single thing depends on rich networks of adjacents. So I'm just going to go through there, right? So we're, biology is in an information age. We're in a post-species, we're domesticating DNA. The unit of survival is not the individual. The unit of survival is the species, and it's not the species, it's the species in ecology environment. And now there's only one gene pool, and genes are not destiny, but our commonwealth. We're in the post, So here's this wonderful, if anybody doesn't know about the Atlas of Economic Complexity by Hausman and, I forget his name now. He's now in Europe. They have developed these rich maps of the ecology of each nation, right? So like if you are an agricultural nation and all of a sudden you want to build integrated chips, ICs, well, you can't just leapfrog, right? There has to be an ecology of industrial capability in order to move from one area to another, in order to evolve, right? So again, even economically, none of us, okay, I'm going to say this in the next slide, right? So valuing values, right? What is economics, right? It's homemaking. What is homemaking? Finding out what's valuable and how much value to put into what's valuable. Now, all economic systems are actually moral frames. Now, this is what I learned from reading David Graeber's Debt the First 5,000 Years. It's a jaw-dropping panorama. And one of the things he says is that Indo-European word for sin, for guilt, and for debt, that's the same word. Now, I was born as a Catholic. And to tell you the truth, I'm not a Catholic anymore. If I'm anything, I'm a secular Buddhist. But as a Catholic, I never got original sin. I just didn't get it. But when we understand that guilt, sin, and debt, these are the same concept, all of a sudden I could understand, we are all born in original debt. None of us can be what we are. I didn't develop English. I didn't develop this computer. I didn't build the roads. I didn't invent electricity. Everything that I am is built on the shoulders of not just giants, but many people. None of us can be what we are without this original debt to what was there for us to use when we were born, right? Original debt, right? So here we see how a group of primates grooming each other. What that is establishing credit or paying debt. That is social fabric. Circulating credit and debt is the richness of our society. If there's no circulating credit or debt, there's no social fabric. This is really, so what we need though is an accounting system. Who did what to who, right? When we're in small groups, that's flesh memory. When we move to an agricultural situation, where we have many occupations, a complex economy, complex exchanges, we needed writing. Then when we moved into the industrial age, we needed new accounting mechanisms, double entry bookkeeping, banks, formal credit, right? Now in the digital environment, we're going to need a blockchain, a distributed ledger for all sorts of things we value. Now, I hope I'm getting there. This is this is about values, right? So this guy, Jonathan Haidt, he's a moral, he's you can see YouTube's about him, moral values, right? He's sort of the king of moral values today. And he talks about basically 6 universal moral values: harm, fairness, in-group authority, purity, and liberty, which is not there. There's another guy, George Lakoff, who talks about one of the greatest books to read on understanding American politics is a book he wrote, I think in the 90s called, or certainly in the 2000s, maybe earlier, moral politics. Now, George Lakoff was a student of Noam Chomsky, broke away because he didn't believe the brain has a grammar thing. But he started researching metaphors, frames, and narratives. And we cannot reason without metaphors. Every time we encounter something completely new, we describe it in terms we're familiar with. Oh, it's like a bit of orange and a bit of vanilla, right? So he talks about in moral politics, in describing American politics, he talks about the patriarchal, strict father family and the nurturing parent family. In the strict father family, right, children are born sinful. They have to be disciplined, right, in order to become productive. The moral framework of a neoliberal economics is, if you're successful in the market, that means you're disciplined, and thus you deserve what you get. But if you're not successful, that means you're not disciplined. And if I help you out, that's an immoral act, because I'm learning the discipline. He contrasts that with a nurturing parent moral framework, right? So children are good. They need a baseline of support in order for them to explore and find out who they are. So then there's another woman who worked with Lawrence Kohlberg, who was the king of moral development, a woman called Carol Gilligan. She wrote In a Different Voice. And then she wrote 20 years later another book, and she talks about democracy and patriarchy. Now, what Jonathan Haidt shows in this chart here is that when we're liberal and very liberal, we rate the values of fairness and do no harm or harm higher than all the other values, whereas in a patriarchal family, these values are sort of more of a cluster.
Very interesting. John?
Yeah?
You only, just so you know, you've got a couple minutes left, okay?
Okay. Well, I'm going to go really quick. So there's the situation we live in. We're living in the pre-modern, modern, postmodern, and the future, right? Where we take control of our own destiny because we evolve ourselves, right? Here is a frame for understanding the difference between the valuing of things that are scarce, rival goods, and the things that are not scarce, non-rival goods. So information is a non-scarcity. If you have an apple and I take your apple, you're diminished, right? Because they're scarce, unless you have the seeds and you can grow an orchard. But if you have a book and I read your book, you're not diminished, you still own the book, but now we can not only talk about the book, we can add to the book. So information as a non-rival good, right, is sort of like the internet, right? When trying to understand the value of a telephone network, Metcalfe came up with Metcalfe's rule. How do you value a telephone network? The number of nodes squared. When you have when your network gets big, the marginal cost, the cost of adding one more node approaches zero. But the value of that extra node is an exponential increase. And that is the nature of information. When we make, so knowledge is power, but knowledge squared is power squared. The nature of information will increase exponentially in value when it's free to be shared. right? So this is another thing I'm just about, I think I'm at my last slide, and I know I've had to go really fast. So in the future, it's value, we have to determine values worth valuing. You know, anything that can be automated will be automated, right? That's the nature of where we're going, but there will never be a shortage of work and activity to do and to value when we're engaged in the enterprise of creating a flourishing life, community, and ecology. The world we take for granted as the stable background to our lives is not given, but is a historical and cultural conquest on which our sense of autonomy is dependent. All right, so I mean, you know, as you can tell, I'm a little bit rusty. There's a lot more to unpack in this. There's a lot more I could have said and should have said, but this is pretty much what I've got to say. Modern monetary theory is our next economic paradigm to meet climate change, to build new infrastructure, to build the foundation for every single person to add and create value. Thank you so much for my stumbling through this.
Thank you, John. No, you did a great job. Wow. Lots to think about. Bernie, would you like to, you know,
John.
I'm just taking notes and I'm going, wow. Okay.
John, thank you so much, John. I really appreciate it. Denny, you had a question?
I have one question. So, John, if somebody wanted to start down this path of understanding what you're saying here and going through that, what would you recommend to them?
Well, I would say there are some of the key theorists, right? So David Graeber, you know, Debt the First 5,000 Years, to start understanding, you know, original debt, that none of us, we are all born in original debt. Circulating credit and debt is society. Stuart Kauffman, At Home in the Universe, about the adjacent possible. Everything has an invisible field of possibilities that only become revealed in a situation of need. Oh my God, I can use this, right? And that an economy that enables us to grab the adjacent possible is more robust and viable. And then the other person is Stephanie Kelton's deficit myth. Modern monetary theory is the single most important economic concept for us to grasp to survive, to flourish in the 21st century, to deal with climate change, and to make a fair and rich world.
So, John, I have as we wrap this up, because we're going to have to go, but I know before we got on the call today, you were talking about different groups and things. Do you have a group or someplace where people could go and converse with you in more depth if they chose to?
Margaret Ann, I just posted in the chat a minute ago, the blogs that are in there.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah, I have those blogs. I'm part of a group that's called the Foresight Synergy Network. And mostly people my age, you know, sort of post-retirement. A lot of them past, you know, people of accomplished scientific background and quite a number of foresight specialists. And then I've been part of a group called the Canadian Association of the Club of Rome. Okay. And now again, it's the podcast I'm working on, Reimagining the Local, right? Because as we were saying, that we need some sort of map about what we're doing. We don't know what we're doing. We don't know what we know. We don't know what all the things that people are doing, trying to innovate. We don't know where we can add value. Right?
Absolutely.
And yeah, so what you guys are doing, Ottawa Connect, is so vital, so vital.